Yes, folks, unfortunately, as the title says, I have been really, by just events that are beyond my control, to the point where orchids may be no longer in my life. And if I lose this collection, which I fear that I have, then there will be no more. So it's a very long story and it's very convoluted and full of drama. But you know that I am in transition. And you also know that I don't have a greenhouse where I've transitioned to. You know my things are in the barn. You also know the last couple weeks, uh, temperatures have gone down and to below freezing, actually. And I am faced with the dilemma, as we all know, that dealing with sudden changes in the weather and temperature and humidity, all of those factors that we need to keep static in our grow space. You have to be there. And especially in this changing season when the weather is very unpredictable, forget about the Weather Channel. They don't know. Only God knows. But lots of drama in my personal life, which are impacting my collection. Now, only a few people know the dramas that have been put upon me the last few weeks. Well, for the last 2 years, but specifically more intensely the last couple of weeks, just due to the fact that my collection, and I'm only going to focus on my collection, not anything else that's going on in my personal life, just my orchids. So, half of my collection is with me mostly and now it is in a carriage house, which was insulated. And then the other was in the greenhouse, which was under renovation, the flooring, and all of that. So, since I am in both places, and plus other obligations in my life that I depend on other people, and which is another reason why it's my fault. But when these people take the help to another level where they become the expert and begin to tell me what's best, then either I step back and let them do it, or I cause a conflict and I will end up by my lonesome at the end, which kills me to all get up. Why someone would try to tell a doctor how to do their job, or someone who has no motivation or curiosity when offered to learn about orchids or anything about orchids. It's completely not accepted, which is sad, but it's not for everyone. And orchids are a lot. But when these people who are, you know, out of it, it's out of their, it's over their head, or they're just not interested. or they can't retain it because there's so much. Then they suddenly become the experts out of nowhere. And if you try to put your point of view across, which it's your deal in the first place, it causes conflict because suddenly it's us versus them, or me versus them, which, how can someone get upset and be pissed because their idea, which is independent of the intention, the initial intention, they've just taken it upon themselves to take ownership. And that has happened in both locations, which leaves me almost impotent, and it's like it's not my collection anymore. Isn't that ironic? For someone to tell the expert how to grow when they don't know what is going on. So what you don't know, last week when our temperatures dropped for the first time, the carriage house was rigged with power and it was doing well, barely maintaining 60 degrees, but it was staying there. So the morning that it was, the first morning it was cold, which it was 26, I went out there and opened the door, and first thing I noticed was the circuits had went off. Circuits had, but anyway, circuit busted, and the fans, there was no heat out there. So I touched some of my cat layers and they were ice cold. So I just closed the door, went back in the house, and informed the owner of the house that the circuit breaker, you know, and I don't know where the box is, but my response was, it's such and such on this wall behind that. And then, it was like I had to go on a treasure hunt. And, that's too much work for me. So if I am not getting any help then with restoring the heat, then they're dead, right? So that took me a minute to get over just the whatever you want to call it. I don't want to. Anyway, so I went to my greenhouse in hopes of getting in a better mood. And bear in mind, these orchids had been put inside by my ex at the greenhouse because the weather suddenly changed. I thought I had another day. And so I was here putting all the orchids in. They had been out in the rain. And so I asked my ex to put them in and turn the heaters on and put them far to the east end or the west end of the greenhouse, because the middle of the greenhouse and the east end is where the contractor comes in, and he still has a little bit of work on the floor. Minor things. So I left a message, didn't talk to him. When I called back later and asked, I was basically told it was okay. They are okay. And when I tried to get a FaceTime and have the camera turned around so I can check it out myself, it was a big drama, huff and puffing, temper tantrum, like it wasn't necessary. They're okay. Again, he's being the expert and refusing to cooperate and assure me that, but what can you do when you're 20 miles away? So that next day, I went there. Now, bear in mind, no, was it? Yeah, it was the next day. No, maybe it was the same day. it was the same day. I went there just to make sure that the heaters were on, because he said the heaters were on, and I wanted to make sure that the plants were not in front of the heater, and they were, kind of down at one end. So I go over there for a little bit of relief and joy, since in my mind, knowing, as we know, established or long-term experienced orchid growers or just plant growers know, cold damage does not show itself for several days, slowly browning, slowly black. Just its signs are very slow. So even if it doesn't look like it's dead, you know that it's a matter of time, especially if it's as cold as it has been. So I went over there to get some joy and some relief. But wouldn't you know, I had put some plants in there before that were already in there, which my Cymboidea, my Angraecums, anyway, some orchids were in there already. So I go in and I am so excited. First thing I see is the Cymboidea that was on the rack underneath a heater, and that's where I had put it, but it's not green anymore. It's browning, and the two new growths that it had on it are flopped over, dead and brown. And all I have to say is Orchid Limited. And you can look back, but I have had, this is my second or third Orchid Limited Cymboidea. And when you buy plants from Orchid Limited, you don't just buy them, you stock them and contemplate, but at the same time, you desire them. But they're the Tiffany, they're expensive. These plants are $200 on up. And when you have lost 2 or 3 times 2, plus when you think of they're rarely offered, rarely. So when you get one that is acclimated, is growing good, pat yourself on the back, cross that orchid off your list, never to be bought again. I just went through that, and the orchid hunt it's exhausting. It's the race for the prize. I'm not the only one looking for these things. There's, and Orchid Limited. So that's the first thing I saw before I even got in there, okay? So when I opened the door, I didn't hear any heaters, and bear in mind, this is right under a heater. So I picked the plant up, and of course, my ex is sitting right in the room, in the study, his favorite spot in front of the TV. And I was not calm. And then why did he have to say, "It'll be okay, it's not dead"? What? Do you know that plant ended up thrown against the wall because it was dead already? And how is somebody who doesn't even know orchids, has no concept of Orchid Limited, do you know, I walked out of there and I was hysterical driving, because it's like in my view, I had lost everything except the Phalaenopsis upstairs. At the other place, and downstairs in the laundry room. And in my mind, what was next? And on top of the idiot at the greenhouse who swore that it was going to be okay, he had the nerve to tell me that the heaters were on. So fast forward the week, things at both places seem to be okay. Fingers crossed, there's still a few days, but they did seem to be okay. Now, I forgot to mention that when I found that Cymboidea, when I went in there to get it, were the orchids all the way down at the end? No. They were spread all through the greenhouse from east to west. Those orchids are fine. They're fine. They're fine. Don't worry. They're fine. Leave me alone. Click. That's what I get. And you know, a mofo like me, I would have been in my car to whoop on somebody's booty, but I had orchids here to deal with. Why does non-orchid people tell an orchid person they shit ain't dead? Oh my God. So, fast forward a week to today, and I go over to the greenhouse. And I walk in and let the dog out the back, and I go in and shut the port, there's a, let me think, there is that, you know what I have out there, it's the dog cage, the cage. I went and closed the door to the cage because I don't like my dog getting in there, and when I closed, I looked to the greenhouse and the door was open! Wide open. How long? I do not know. All I know is I shut the door and walked away, because bear in mind that is the west end of the greenhouse where the big fan is, where I told idiot to put the plants. So they are right by that open door. Boy. So I shut the door and left and called back and asked, how come the door was wide open? And how come there was no heat on? Huh? I don't get it. I ain't been there. Why is the door open? Do you know it is fall and mice, possums, every ant critter environment is looking for a heat and warmth and cover and shelter. Birds. Okay, so that was just a few minutes ago. And he had the nerve to call me back, because he wasn't there, said he don't know. And the heaters were on. And the temperature, he says, the thermometer's in there, which I don't know what thermometer he's talking about. But he said the thermometer says it's 62 degrees. Do you hear me? These people, they are on fake news. And they think I'm stupid. That the door to the greenhouse is wide open. It's 30 degrees outside that door, and there's no heat in there. Do you know why these orchids are probably out of my life? and I don't know whether to laugh or cry. I don't know whether to live or die, and it cuts like a knife. They're out of my life. Ooh, ooh. Tito, bring me a tissue.